Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Yen Awards 2021. My name's Tom Allen Stevens. I'm your chair for this afternoon, and I can't wait to hear about what we're going to learn this afternoon. It really is, this is the highlight of the year. Yen really is a celebration of everything that's good about what we do in our industry. Yes, it's about the yield, but above all, it's about the achievement. And more importantly, the personal journey behind that. And of course, sharing that knowledge. And that's what today is all about. And that's why I'm so excited to be in this room chairing this session. And what a privilege. I mean, you guys are the gods of farming. You really are. You're the gods of farming. We just had COP26, and political leaders spent 2 weeks sitting around in rooms working out how on earth we're going to get to net zero. Well, you guys are doing it. You really are. I bet if we were to tot up the carbon footprint of everybody in this room, we'd be significantly the right side of net zero. And you are producing the most staggering, fantastic yields on top of that. This is not blah, blah, blah. We're actually doing this right here, right now, okay? And that's what this is all about, that sense of achievement. So what we're going to hear about this afternoon is how to unlock those secrets. And that's really what I'm excited about today. So just a few housekeeping points. We haven't got a fire alarm today, so if we hear a fire alarm, it's a real fire. There's a fire exit there, and I believe there's also fire exits elsewhere. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Roger. We're also recording this, so please don't swear. And there are basis and Neuroso points available, and I think there's a form at the back of the room. Yeah. Now, the mobile phones, please switch your mobile phones to silent, but keep them on and use them for social media. We have a hashtag, which is, so there's at @ADASYen, and also hashtag Yen Awards as well. So do use social media. Tell everyone how wonderful and fantastic this is. See how many times we can mention Tim Lammerman. Then we're also going to be using Slido as well. So I'm going to ask you to, you don't have to download the app. Do I need to go forward? Sorry, yeah, there we go. Yes, so we're also using Slido. Sorry about that. We're going to do a practice in a minute as well. So this is an online form. You don't have to download the app, but you do have to go on into Google, whatever, find slido.com. And when you go in there, then you need to use the hashtag Yen Awards, okay, to get into it. So, look, there we go. This is the a poll. So, just to try it out, are you a Yen entrant in 2021? Are you a Yen sponsor in 2021? Or are you a visitor? So if you can all find the Slido app, give it a go and start putting in your answers on that. We'll just give it a couple more seconds. Oh, look at that. We've got a few. It's going up and down. Most of you are visitors, it seems. And there's entrants very much in second place. So yeah, that looks like it. So half of you are visitors. 29%. No, 33%. No, oh my God. How am I supposed to chair this? Anyway, right. Well, I mean, that's really good. But let's have more Yen entrants this time next year, and let's have less visitors. So all of you who are visitors, you need to be an entrant, okay? Right. Anyway, listen. So I'm shortly going to hand over to Roger, and then I'm delighted that Vice President of the NFU, Tom Bradshaw, is here. And then the bit we've all been waiting for, the Yen Awards. And then we'll be having a panel session, and that's when the secrets will really come out with some of the winners, and you'll learn an awful lot about how to get those stonking crops. And then we'll wrap up and close after that. So I'm going to ask Roger, if, would you like to, oh, I do apologize. There's also, there are further events coming up, sorry, Roger, as well. Now, these are webinars for all of the Yen 2021 participants on the 6th of December and the 8th of December. So please sign up for those. How do you register for them, Roger?
We'll tell you at the end.
We'll tell you at the end how to register, but they're well worth visiting. Anyway, I'm going to hand over to Roger.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you for your enthusiastic welcome to everyone. And may I share in that welcome to everyone? I might be slightly taller than you, Tom. Good to know that we've got a lot of visitors. The job today is to celebrate the excellence of our winners in our yield competition. But as my job is for the visitors particularly, and particularly if you're a visitor who's never been to a Yen meeting before, and you please feel very welcome, is to tell you what the Yen is all about and persuade you that it might be a good idea to engage in the Yen in the coming year. So what I want to do is just a quick history. Back in 2012, NIAB led a review of yields in the UK, crop yields in the UK. And it was an excellent report. They did a fantastic job, but they really lacked data. They didn't have data about what was going on farms. There isn't shared data, or there wasn't shared data. So at the same time that we had the London Olympics, everybody was measuring everything and trusting those measurements. So we thought, why don't we do that for crops? And basically that was the origin of the Yen. So what we decided to do was to share trustworthy measurements. So we validate all our yields so they're trustworthy, and we try to explain them. So we know why the winners win, and we know why the other people don't win. And that's really the job. And after 9 years now, we've got something like 2,500 yields, and we've got more than 500,000 explanatory observations to go with those yields. So we have a fantastic database, and we produce, for the individual entrants, we produce a 24-page report about every single crop, and it's a bespoke report that specifically tells you about that particular crop. And that's really the achievement of what we've been doing in the last few weeks, and I'm going to show you the people who've done it, but particularly the database is what's valuable. So this is the team of my colleagues who have been beavering away night and day, I can tell you night as well as day, in order to produce the reports that everybody should have received last evening. And they've all, at the same time, they've been helping the Yens to proliferate. So we began with a cereal Yen, which is the one in the middle, but now we have all sorts of Yens, and not just addressing yields of different crops, but also particular issues that we've identified. So nutrition is clearly an issue that we're not to grips with in the arable industry. So we've set up Yen Nutrition in order to try and tackle that, and Yen Zero, and Daniel at the end, who's going to talk about Yen and the future at the end, is going to talk more about that, so I won't dwell on it now. But I've been particularly pleased about the recognition that the Yen has received this year. So Daniel and I have been involved in international meetings, scientist meetings, and there is definitely a move for agricultural research to move on farm with farmers. So farmer-centric research is becoming a global phenomenon, and we are very much in the lead of that, I can tell you. We know all the other people who are doing it, from China to Australia to the United States, what we're doing is an exemplar for them. We also feature in the National Food Strategy that was published led by Henry Dimbleby this year. We feature as an exemplar of on-farm innovation. We've got yen starting in North America. We've had one on Prince Edward Island, which has expanded into New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. And we've got a new one which we attended the award ceremony of yesterday around the Great Lakes region. So, and also we're very much, I think, leading DEFRA in its thinking about its farm innovation program. So all sorts of good things coming out. And actually, Tom mentioned COP26. We featured in one of the presentations at COP26, and Daniel will talk a bit more about that later. But I really need to honor and thank and own the fact that yen is not an ADAS thing, it's a collaborative thing. We're part of it, but we're very much guided by all these organizations who have committed not just money, but lots of effort into the yen and making it the success it is. So we meet with them twice a year. They guide us in steering what way to go, and they'll be guiding us into the future, I'm sure, as we seek to develop the yens, because we really want to develop the yens. But I just want to pick out one sponsor, one particular person from Hutchinson's, top left, who have been sponsoring us from the very beginning. Bob Bulmer was involved from the very beginning. The engagement that he established was very much central to the way we now operate. And Bob retired this year, but before he retired last year, he spoke about the difference that yen had made to the Hutchinson's business. And I think this is music to my ears, but it's just what we wanted to happen. So before, in 2012, yes, the Hutchinsons were an effective advisory organization, helping farmers with individual decisions, but there wasn't particularly an integrated attitude to it. But now, having been involved in the yen for all those years, there's a sort of theoretical background of of a holistic way of describing how crops grow, and the belief that not just 11 tons was enough, but actually 15 tons is possible almost anywhere. And we've just got to work out how to do it on each bit of land. But my second job for the morning, so that's my introduction to the yen. My second job is to talk to you about this season. So this season we had 200 just cereal entrants and 43 oilseed entrants that completed the course. We do have a few people who register in enthusiasm but don't manage to submit a yield. That's always a big disappointment, but actually it's a small number compared with the number that starts. And this year we've had entrants from the Netherlands, from Ireland, from Scandinavia, and we've had 2 entries from New Zealand, including the world record holder for the wheat yield. So we're definitely generating interest. And now what I've got to do is to try and summarize the complexity of the 2020-21 season for wheat, well, not just wheat, all cereals, and for oilseed rape. Along the top, you'll see the 4 seasons. So we've got autumn, winter, spring, summer. Down the side, you can see we've got rainfall, temperature, and solar radiation. Well, it isn't actually solar radiation. These maps, they're fantastic maps. They're anomaly maps. You can get them on the Met Office's website. But they measure the sun in hours. What matters to a crop is not, well, it is hours, but what really matters is energy. So what you find in your reports is energy. And I just wonder whether you would pick out one of those maps as being the most important thing that influenced yield this year. I'm not giving you long to make up your minds. Probably a lot of you would have picked on the April and the spring. So we had this hugely dry April followed by the very wet May. And clearly that's had an effect. And as you'll see from the data I'll show you in a minute. But in fact, I would put a ring around this bottom right map because it differentiates between the north and the south. You can see the north generally had more than its average sun hours this year, whereas the south generally had less than its average sun hours this year. And crops are converters of energy. We need energy in order to make them grow. So we translate all those maps into maps of yield potential. So we estimate the water and the energy that's available to your crops, and we do it for cereals on the left, oilseeds on the right. Both those maps are for if your soil has a pretty but small water holding capacity. We hope that you all are getting through the yen an understanding of what your crop's water holding capacity is, because I would say, forget soil health. If you don't know your soil's water holding capacity, you're meddling with the detail when it comes to thinking about soil health. It's the water holding capacity that really matters. Do you know it? And it will help you explain a lot of what's happening with your crops. But the next to last slide is, I hope I'm not too over time. I'm not. So I've got a bit of time to go down what happened with wheat this year. Okay. So the line down the middle relates to the average yen crop over the last 8 years, which yielded 11 tons per hectare, thereabouts. So what we've done is compare what happened this year to all those previous 8 years. And this is the value of the yen database that we've got now, is that we can make these really pretty confident comparisons of how we compare one year with another, one farm with another, one crop with another, whatever it is. So solar radiation was down by a bit more than 10%, whereas rainfall was, obviously it went up and down month by month, but overall it was only just a bit above average in the months that mattered. So that was April, May, June, and July. The yield potential, the yield potentials in the yen have always been very high, and we've realized that we were actually not calculating the soil available water in the way that is conventional, which is to assume that your roots can exert less suction in the subsoil than in the topsoil. So we have reduced the estimate by about a quarter of what a deep soil will hold. Okay, so some of you will have found that your percentages of potential and your percentages of potential have gone up, and your potentials have gone down a bit this year. So it's not a fair comparison with previous years, but generally it is not down just because of that, it's down because of the dull summer. As far as wheat is concerned. So actually the autumn was quite benign. We established good crops over winter, despite the wet winter. The tiller numbers were good, and so the number of heads was significantly above average, something like 14% above average. And then we went into May. May was wet. It allowed the crop to grow quite tall in relation to average, but the number of grains per head, because of the density of the heads and because of the dull conditions in May, and May is absolutely crucial to the formation for wheat of grains per ear, then we didn't have the grains per ear that we have normally. That wasn't all bad, because the combination of the head number and the grain number gave us slightly more grains per square meter than average. But then we went into fairly dull June and July, very dull August, but clearly a lot of crops weren't green in August. But the dullness of the June and July was significant, and it translated into lower 1,000 grain weight, lower specific weight, and lower final crop biomass, and slightly lower yields than the 11 ton per hectare average. Okay, but the percentages of potential were up just because, well, I think partly because we changed the way we calculate it. Specific weight down, as I said, and grain protein down. So now if we look at oilseed rape, the fact that the crops, although most crops grow in the summer and are dormant in the winter, the subtleties of the weather this year mean that the effects on oilseed rape are different from the effects that they were on wheat. So we have, again, this is the comparison we can make with oilseed rape, because we didn't start oilseed rape until 2017, was it, Sarah? So we've only got 4 years to compare with for oilseed rape. So the solar radiation looks less down, but that's just because of what it's been compared with. So the rainfall was slightly up. April to July rainfall was slightly up again. The potential and the soil calculations that we do hasn't been so significant on oilseed rape, because oilseed rape, I think, is less prone to water limitation than wheat. But I mean, these results, I'm looking at Sarah all the time because she's responsible for the oilseed rape, but these results are almost as new to us as they are to you. So I'm not absolutely confident about everything I'm saying of the reasons for all this. But the interesting thing is that whilst seeds per square metre were up on wheat, they were down on rape. And we think that's because the number of seeds per square metre in rape is determined later, and the most important component is what's going on in May. So the retention of the pods, the number of seeds per pod, which is generated in May. So that's brought down the number of seeds. The 1,000 seed weight was slightly up, but not very much. Total biomass was down, and we think that's as a result of the dry April, the shortness of the crop. It was shorter this year than normal, and less biomass growth generated at that time, which translated right through. So the harvest index was actually significantly up, more than 20% up. So overall, yields of oilseed rape were down by 10%. So overall, the summary of this year is it's been a promising year which didn't realize its promise. But so to summarize everything I've said, just for visitors, what we think we've set up is a network of farmers, advisors, suppliers, and researchers all working together. And we've been doing it now for 9 years, and we're committed to carrying on with this. And Dan will talk about how we're evolving the yen into the future. We're delivering trustworthy measurements that can be shared by everyone. So it's a learning by sharing experience. Each individual member gets a 24-page report with over 100 metrics within that report that help to explain the yield. We now have yens that cover almost every major arable crop in the UK, and we're now starting to have yens overseas. From the database, I mean, we've got a technical webinars later in early December where we can talk about this in more detail, but the general messages from the database are that big yields come from big crops. That's actually something we genuinely learned as a result of the yen. We always thought modest canopies and head numbers were enough, but they're not. And according to the yen data, it's not all about what you spend on inputs. It's about how you use those inputs. And inputs aren't the answer entirely, because in the data there is a huge farm factor, which means that there's all sorts of scope to learn one farm to another. So there's a lot of the variation is due to farm differences, and that's having taken out the soil differences, the regional differences, the previous crop differences. The farm is a big factor in governing yield. So the summary of the season is lots of promise, but a bit disappointing, and I'll leave Dan to talk about the future. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. We've got time for a quick question for Roger, if anyone has a burning question. I must say that was a fascinating insight into the season. No? Well, we'll move straight on. I'm delighted to introduce now, but just before we go into the actual awards themselves, NFU Vice President Tom Bradshaw needs no introduction, really. Tom's been such a champion for the arable sector as Combinable Crops chairman, and now he's championing the whole of farming, and UK farmers in particular, at such a difficult time for our sector. So Tom, would you like to come up and say a few words?
Thank you very much, Tom. And I think you gave me an hour to bore the audience, so I'll make sure I make the most of that. Roger, you said that 2020 got off to a good start. I'm going to have to take you up on that. If you farm in East Anglia and you think 2020 got off to a good start, then I don't know what a bad start looks like, because the last 2 autumns preceding this one were incredibly challenging. And at the beginning of October, I was sat at home on farm thinking, oh no, we can't have a third. But thankfully, this autumn has been much kinder, and generally crops have established very well. And I think we will go into winter with great yield potential. I was a very keen participant in Yen when I had more time on my hands. And unfortunately, I'm delighted to do the NFU role, but it does take a lot of my time, and it means I'm not taking part at the moment. But I was always the bridesmaid and never the bride. So there'll be some of you out there who have done far better than I have. Both Tom and Roger talked about COP. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about net zero. But the element of this that comes from Yen is about productive efficiency. And for every one of you in the audience that's involved with producing crops in one way or another, whether that be as an advisor, as a farmer, it's about making sure that we maximize our resource use efficiency. As we move forward, farmers in the UK have to be genuinely world leading. And if we're not doing that today, we've got to get better. And it's going to be about how we turn those inputs into outputs, and how we really reduce our environmental footprint while producing the crops that are going to either feed people or feed livestock. And I think Yen is great for helping build the platform, build the knowledge base. And as Roger said, before they started Yen, it wasn't actually known that big crops produce big yields. And yet what's been very clear is that big crops do produce big yields. There'll probably be several of the winners that are using organic manures. And yet at the moment we have an Environment Agency which seem to want to stop us spreading organic manures at the time of year when they really fit into the arable rotation. Putting organic manures on in the autumn is something which has been done for generations. It was always the heart of sustainability, making sure that we use those organic manures to feed the crops that either feed livestock or feed people. And yet we're now being told that that's the root cause of pollution. Look, that's a really big problem, and something that from an NFU, wearing my NFU hat, we've got to make sure that we have a policy framework that enables you to run competitive, commercial, profitable businesses. And I do worry at the moment that the regulatory framework is going to tie our hands behind our backs. And that's something that is a real concern to me and to our members and farmers in the audience. So I guess, it's our job to make sure that we really do get that regulatory framework in place that does enable us to drive forwards. I am quite excited about the science and technology field, because I think we do have a government that will support the adoption of science and technology as we move forwards. There's not many things that I've agreed with recently, but when Boris Johnson stood outside the front of Number 10 and said he wanted to unleash the power of our world-leading plant scientists, that's a really exciting future that will genuinely draw the best brains around the world to the UK if we can unlock that potential. And I think that's something that we should be really excited about for the future. But that's enough from me. There's going to be the winners are in the audience, and I know Tom wants to get on and make sure that you receive your award. So thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, the moment we've all been waiting for. Hang on, there we go. We're going to run through the awards now. And when I read out your name, if you'd like to come up to the front, accept your trophy. Tom, you're going to be handing out the trophies, I think. We'll do first is we'll do the cereal awards first, and then we'll move into the Oilseed awards. When we get to the regional awards, then if you'd all like to come up together for those, I'll read them all out. And if you'd all like to come up together for those, so you come up, you pick up your trophy, you have a photo taken, and then you go and sit down. Great. Anyway, so here we go. Let's start with the cereal awards. We'll start with the bronze award for the best cereal award, for the best cereal yield. And the winner is Tim Lammion. Well done, Tim. That's great. And don't go too far, Tim. A silver award for the best cereal yield is, well, it's Tim Lammiman. Congratulations, Tim. And now, the Gold Award for the best cereal yield of 2021. I wonder who it's going to be. And it's Tim Lammiman. Well done, Tim. Congratulations. 15.6 tons. And I think, was that a world record? No. It beat the world record, that's right, yeah. It beat the world record holder, there we go. Sorry, just to clarify. Great, we'll move straight on to the best percentage of cereal potential yield. So as Roger explained earlier, every farm has a potential. So this is the best percentage of that potential. And we've got some really quite impressive figures coming up here, by the way. So, Bronze Award for best percentage of cereal potential yield goes to, congratulations to Alan Chambers of County Down with 105%. I'm not entirely sure how you get 105%. Either Alan's doing something pretty magic or the science is a bit hooky, I don't know. And moving on to the Silver Award for best percentage of cereal potential yield. Bit of a mouthful, that one. Goes to, congratulations, Mark McCallum of St Martin's Farm, Rochester, with, again, a 107%. Mark, I don't think is here for us, and is someone picking up his award? No, right? So we'll go straight on to Gold Award, and the best percentage of cereal potential yield goes to Ian Learmont. Well done, Ian. Greens of Savok, Aberdeenshire. Sponsored by Hutchinson's. Thank you, Peter. Great. So moving on now to the best winter barley yield. And the silver award for best winter barley yield goes to Craig Peddy of Conceres Farm, Fife. Well done, Craig. I don't think Craig is with us. No. And moving on to the, hang on. Sorry? Move on. So we'll move on to the... So the silver award for the best percentage of a winter barley potential yield goes to Craig Peddy of Conceres Farm, Fife, with 78% of 16.7 tonnes. And the gold award for best winter barley yield goes to Tim Lammiman. Well done, Tim. With a yield of 14.2 tonnes per hectare. Oh, yeah, and this is a world record, so well done, Tim. I think that deserves an extra round of applause. Moving on to the gold award for best percentage of winter barley potential yield. And the winner is Tim Lammiman. Well done, Tim. With 80% of 17.9 tonnes per hectare. Moving on. So, spring barley. And The Bronze Award for Best Spring Barley Yield goes to, congratulations, Will Hamilton of Bee Edge Farm, Berwickshire, with a grain yield of 8.7 tonnes per hectare. Well done, Will. And the Bronze Award for the Best Percentage of Potential Yield goes to, again, Will Hamilton. Well done, Will. With a 64% of 13.5 tonnes per hectare. And the Silver Award for Best Spring Barley Yield goes to Kari Alasari from Alasari Farm in Finland. So well done. Well done to Kari. And the Silver Award for Best Percentage of Potential Yield goes to David Matthews of Cotton House, County Down. Well done, David. And the Gold Award for Best Spring Barley Yield goes to, well done, David, with a grain yield of 9 tonnes a hectare. Moving on, the Gold Award for the Best Percentage of Potential Yield goes to, well done, Peter Chapman of South Redbog Farm, Aberdeenshire, sponsored by Lima Grain, with a yield of 82% of 9.7 tonnes per hectare. So moving on to oats. So the Silver Award for Best Oats Yield. And that goes to, well done, Will Hamilton of Bee Edge Farm, Berwickshire, with a grain yield of 8.3 tonnes per hectare. And the best percentage of oats potential yield goes to, well done, Will. With a, sorry, I should have warned you, shouldn't I? Getting plenty of exercise here. 61% of 13.7 tonnes per hectare. And moving on for the Gold Award, the best oats yield overall goes to, well done, Simon Best of Acton House Farm, County Armagh, with a grain yield of 9.2 tonnes per hectare. Best by name, best by nature, obviously. And the Gold Award for the best percentage of oats potential yield goes to, well done, Will. I'm getting everyone doing a lot of walking here, aren't I? Well done, Simon. So that's 87% of 10.5 tonnes per hectare. Great. So then there's the award for yield trials. Sorry, I brought that up a little bit too quickly. That's the Gold Award for the best yield in cereal trials that's awarded every year. And well done to John Kerr of Cambridgeshire, sponsored by Hutchinson's, with a grain yield of 12.4 tonnes per hectare. Is John here? Great. And the best percentage of potential yield in cereal trials goes to Nordic Seed of Dingby in Denmark. So well done, with a grain yield of 75% of 16.3 tonnes per hectare potential. Great. So that's all those the outright awards. We're now going to the regional awards, and for the cereal yield, for the highest cereal yield, and we've got these the regions here. So congratulations go to Robert Fleming of Berwick-on-Tweed, Thomas Todd of Northumberland, Mark Doble of Somerset, and James Mays of Essex. If you'd like to come up and receive your certificates. Yep. Oh, we've also got the winners in the East Midlands, South East and outside the UK, who are, well done, Tim Lammiman in Lincolnshire, Richard Budd in Kent, and Eric and Maxine Watson of Mid-Canterbury, New Zealand. If you'd like to come up and accept your certificates. For the highest percentage of potential cereal yield, the cereal regional award winners are, well done, Ian Learmont of Aberdeenshire, sponsored by Hutchinson's, Alan Chambers of County Down, sponsored by AHDB, Howard Emmett of Cornwall, sponsored by AHDB, and Paul Spinks of Norfolk, sponsored by Hutchinson's. Well done. If you'd like to come up. And if you'd like to go across for your photo as well. And in the East Midlands, well done, Tim Lammiman of Lincolnshire, David Passmore of Oxfordshire, Eric and Maxine Watson of Mid-Canterbury, New Zealand. Congratulations. If you'd like to come up and take your certificate. I can see that Tim's going to be struggling to take all of these awards home with him. So the best, we'll start with the best seed yield, and the bronze award for best oilseed seed yield goes to, well done, David Fuller of McGregor Farms, Berwickshire, sponsored by Bayer. Is David here? Fantastic. With a gross output of 6.2 tonnes per hectare. Moving on to the silver award for best oilseed yield goes to, well done, Tim Lammiman, a gross output of 6.3 tonnes per hectare. And the gold award for best oilseed seed yield goes to, well done, Mark Stubbs of Manor Farm, Lincolnshire, with an output of 6.7 tonnes per hectare. Well done, that's great. Moving on to best percentage of oilseed potential yield, bronze award goes to, well done, Tim, with a gross output of 56% of 11.2 tonnes per hectare. And the silver award for best percentage of oilseed potential yield goes to, well done, David, of McGregor Farms, Berwickshire, sponsored by Bayer, with a gross output of 57% of 10.8 tonnes per hectare. And the gold award for best percentage of oilseed potential yield goes to, well done, Mark Stubbs, with a 59% of 11.3 tonnes per hectare. And finally, the Innovator of the Year. So this is the Yen champion, someone who really does sort of typify everything that the Yen is all about. I'm really delighted that this person has received the award. So I'd just like to welcome up David Passmore. Well done. Congratulations. So David got his award for his high yields, innovative ideas, and use of trials and analysis for yield enhancement. Fantastic. Great. Well, we're now going to move straight on to the winners forum. So what I'd like to do is ask the. Do we have the names up here? Yes, I think you know who you are. Would those winners like to come up and join me on the stage here, please? And we're going to be asking questions via Slido. So please, if you open up the app and stick those questions in, we'll have a look at some of those questions in a minute. But this is the moment we've really all been waiting for. So this is where the secrets really come out, and we can dive into the detail of how these farmers got their amazing stonking yields. I have to say they're about twice the yields that I can achieve at home. Oh, and Roger's here as well. He's not a winner, but he's a scientist, so. Fantastic. Well, I don't know whether we've got any questions on the Slido up yet, but we've got our first question. Why don't we ask that one? So how are you selecting varieties? Why don't we start with Tim?
So on the variety front, I'm trying to go with something that's got a good septoria resistance now, because obviously this year that was a major issue for a lot of the grain samples. Septoria has caused major problems with varietal breakdowns. I'm not going to mention the word because one or two might throw some stuff at me.
Tim, could you put your microphone slightly closer to your mouth, please?
Yeah. Is that any better, Tom?
Is that better? Yeah.
Yep. So septoria is a major issue this year, or certainly was in Lincolnshire, and varietal resistance to septoria is going to be more of a problem with the loss of Bravo. So all my variety thoughts in the last couple of years have been centering on varieties that have got a 6+ septoria resistance. Yellow rust is an issue which seems to be able to be controlled. So varieties that we've grown this year were Colosseum, which has the swear word of varieties in there. I'm not going to mention it. And it managed to do reasonably well in septoria control, but we had to use high rates of fungicide on it. Moving towards Theodore and Champion, they look amazing in septoria resistance, and I was surprised how well they held up throughout the season. Even with the new fungicides, we didn't seem to have the issues that a lot of the rest of the county had with the breakdown of the flag leaf and leaf 2 losing sunlight capture. So my thoughts are looking at septoria resistant varieties, standing power, and going forward with newer varieties, or stepping right back to some of the older varieties. Some of the ones in the middle there, of course, some major problems this year, which everybody will know. So that's where I'm at with varieties.
Great. Would you like to pass on to Mark? Let's hear how you've been doing it on oilseeds.
Yeah, so with oilseeds and that, I look at hybrids and that. I know a lot of you probably will be more conventional on that, but the reason for that is mainly because you get good. If you can get the good establishment in the autumn and that, then just goes to sleep, and then in the spring you get a lot of vigor and everything, and it just romps away in the spring.
Do you want to move on down the line, Simon? Do you want to give an idea?
Yeah, so I suppose from the perspective of our winter oats, all of our oats are Mascani. Directed, I suppose, mainly from milling quality. The miller are very particular about what they want. Used to be around bushel weight, specific weight, but we've actually moved to a new model around kernel content and hullability, and bonuses are paid on that, which effectively is mill yield. So very much focused towards improving mill yield and then getting the advantage of that on a win-win basis between grower and mill.
David. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll talk about oilseeds again. We choose hybrid varieties for very much the same reasons. Vigor, look at the disease. The traits that hybrids can bring you are obviously greater than any conventional varieties. So looking at pod shatter, oil content, disease ratings, and there's also new traits with the turnip yellow virus, and also club root. If we have club root in fields, we'll pick a variety that's club root resistant. So it's basically looking at the traits that hybrid can bring you, and that's how I do it.
I'm mostly growing seed crops, so it's sort of selected for me. The only thing I think one of the findings of Yen is variety isn't that big a factor. Would that be true, Roger? It's all the data of your 2,000 samples or something. There's not a big correlation in variety. It's more how they're grown and the farm factor, rather than think you're going to shoot up the Yen chart by choosing a new variety. Is more to it than that, I think. Would you agree with that, Roger?
I think David's just proved why he's the innovator of the year. He's listened to what we learn, but I am always impressed by when I talk to Tim about his choice of varieties. He's mentioned disease today, but he hasn't mentioned leaf angle, and he usually mentions leaf angle. And I mean, what Tim seemed to me to do is to understand the concept of light interception. You know, crops need more than one layer of leaves in order to fully exploit the light. Rhubarb doesn't yield well, okay? So it needs these vertical leaves to share out the light, because leaves get saturated if they're flat to the light. So they need to be like that. But I mean, that's theory. It's not, you know, Tim proves it, but with a whole combination of factors.
Before you pass the mic back, Roger, this question about more than 100% output, I think we need to tackle that. And we've got 3 winners who got more than 100% this year. It's happened in previous years as well. So how does that happen?
Well, you actually flippantly gave the right answer to that. So it's either the science is wrong or there's something dodgy going on the farm. So
dodgy?
Well,
dodgy. I think there are several people who are going to take offense to that. I think we're talking about innovation, aren't we?
Well, no, we're talking about our ability to estimate the water that is available from our soils. I mean, I did say that in my talk. You know, we're blind to the vital importance of how much water our soils hold and how far our roots go down. We assume if you don't tell us there's rock within 1.5 meters, we assume your roots get down and extract all the water to 1.5 meters. Now, if you tell us there's rock at 90 centimeters, we say, okay, the water below that isn't available. But all those assumptions are very crude assumptions that you have to make. We accept that, and that we have to make because we have to assume a certain proportion of the water is available, and all soils hold water that is not available. It's too hard for the crop to pull it out of the water of the soil. So it could be just that our science is wrong, or it could be that your estimates are wrong.
Great. Would you like to pass the mic back down, Roger? We seem to have we've got a yeah, indeed, yeah. It's probably not COVID secure. Anyway, moving on. We've got an interesting question up the top here. So what do you think you do differently to your neighbours? I had an interesting time a while ago where I was talking to some emerging leaders with the Oxford Farming Conference, and this was just the time when Brexit came out. And we're talking about thoughts and fears. And of course, with the BPS going away, that's, you know, everyone knew that they were going to get poorer. And it was going to become more challenging for them, but they weren't going to lose as much as their neighbour. And I really I thought that was quite an interesting idea. So the opportunity was there to take over their neighbour. So what do we think that we're doing that our neighbours are not doing? Tim, would you like to start?
Well, obviously I'm sat very near one at the moment, so it's catching me up rapidly. But apart from that, I suppose looking at what I do, what Mark does, we do it differently, but almost in the same way, if you see what I mean. It's overhauling what you're doing, looking into massive depths. So I use the no stone unturned approach. So every part of the growing season, every disease that's coming in, try and be one step in front all the time. Because the final secret, as Roger covered in our thing, is about leaf light capture. So all the system I use is about maintaining green leaf light capture throughout the season. And this year was totally different to last year, how we did it. And the other bit everybody seems to overlook, and I'm afraid I have to throw it back to ADAS as well, is the one thing about yield is not just biomass, it's harvest index. So you can have a massive biomass, but if your harvest index is only 40%, you're in real trouble. Now, if you start scoring over 50% in your harvest index, that's where you get the massive yields from. And that's the one secret we seem to have done in the last 3 or 4 years, is actually convert a biomass into a harvest index. And once you've got a harvest index, you've got a massive yield. And I think that's where we're getting it from. 2 years previous, I'd say nutrition was the main score. This year, we needed the nutrition to build the biomass, and the fungicides was the score at home. Some of the massive BSF products out there and the Bio Nature product range has put us where we're at. And grain, that turning that light capture into grain is what we definitely have done this year in the reports. You can see it probably stands out miles above some of the other ones in what we've actually turned into grain from the light leaf capture. So that's where we are, and that's we were 3 weeks greener than every other wheat crop round us, but we were harvesting similar times. So we had 3 leaves in the wheat producing, keeping that sunlight capture, and we were harvesting our winter barley when a lot of people on the sands lower down were harvesting their wheat crops this year. So that it's all about light capture, keeping it greener, and maintaining that grain sample.
Yeah, how would you add to that, Mark?
Yeah, I agree with Tim about the harvest index and the green leaf. Like for the wheat, Tim's used more fungicides than me on the wheat. I suffered badly with late septoria, so my wheat yield's down. So that's already proved the difference between neighbours there. For my oilseed rate, I actually drilled the crop later because of how the weather was in the autumn. So everything was put back later. So it meant that I captured all the late sunlight. I missed the April frosts. I wasn't flowering at April, so I missed them frosts to nip some of the flower buds. But most crops this year, to be fair, rape sets its seeds to a certain level, and that wasn't a major factor. But what I've looked at my report is everything seemed to be later this year than most people with my oilseed rape, and that's what's probably increased my yield this year.
Right, Simon, do you want to take the other mic, Simon?
Yeah, I suppose a couple of things. We're a leaf farm, so I'm listening to Tom and sort of maximizing resource efficiency, I suppose, is the key to what we do. So I use a lot of compost, a lot of organic manures. We actually have a green waste recycling business, which is part of the farm business, and I suppose making use of organic manures where possible. Tying on to that is trying to, I suppose, be as efficient as possible with nutrition. So I've managed to reduce inputs and reduce nitrogen usage over sort of the last couple of seasons, really by targeting what I need, using leaf analysis, and Yen has been really helpful in that, but also sap analysis, and trying just to be really targeted about our timing of nitrogen and the amount of nitrogen. And on oats this year, as an example, I was able to use 100 kilos to the hectare, which is considerably lower than I'd have used in the past. So I think being really targeted on what we do and maximising our sort of organic potential of the soil.
Tom, can I just agree with what he was saying there about the nutrition? I've noticed in oilseed rape, some of my other neighbours, they put more nitrogen on their oilseed rape, which is actually giving them a negative yield. And so I seem to have sort of found my plateau where you need to be with nitrogen levels and that. So that is a key factor. Once you find that, it'll give you the maximum yield.
Great. David, do you want to give your view?
I think that's a tricky question to answer, but I think from my perspective, I guess it's attention to detail. I do the agronomy on the farm, so I walk all the crops and make the decisions for those. Don't rely on third-party agronomists making decisions for me. And sometimes you drive by the neighbours' fields and they're spraying, and you wonder what are they actually spraying? So have they been told to spray and they've got weathered out and sprayed at the wrong time? I don't really know what the difference is, but I think attention to detail, knowing your crops, knowing your farms, brings a lot to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with David. It's I do my own agronomy, but a lot of it's just knowing your farm, knowing your fields, knowing the weather, and just that sort of sixth sense of where the season's going. Is sort of that. There is science in it, but there's an unwritten science about what you're doing, why you're planting it in the field that year. We've got a very mixed rotation. I'm sort of ticking 10 years ahead where we're going to plant oilseed rape and stuff like that. And it's just, I don't know, none of it's written down. And that's why I do a lot of trials. I'm trying to challenge myself. And it's a good thing about yen. It pitches you up against everyone. You've got all these reports. I think yen would say you don't necessarily know which aspects of those are driving yields. That's why you're testing them. That's what we're trying to do at home. And it's just always trying to learn and think next year you're going to do it better, sort of thing. Sometimes rain, or more importantly, lack of sun gets in the way. But yes, just that constant thinking of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and challenging yourself or your agronomist why you're doing something. But yeah.
Well, we'll come on to on-farm trials in a bit, but Roger, put some science around this. I know that you talk about the farmer factor, or is it the farm factor? Just to explain a little bit more about that.
Well, there's a limit to what I can explain. I mean, as I said when I spoke, there's something about farms that is not there in our physical data. It's not in the variety, it's not in the soil, it's not in the way we describe soil. It's not, these are all factors that do account for some of the variation, but and of course season. We've got season, as Bob Bulmer said when he sort of gave his speech last year. It's half to do with the weather, but there is another half, and the other half is partly husbandry. The amount of variation that's attributable to variety, as David said, is about, I think, 2%, Dan, or something like that. It's very small compared with the farm factor, which is something like 20-25% of the variation. So, and when I say this to advisors, they're not surprised. So, but I don't think, when we invest a huge amount of public money in genetics, but we don't invest a huge amount of public money in the farm factor. And I think that's a mistake. I think the yen shows that that's a mistake. And we're beginning to sort of persuade the academic community that perhaps these guys are the things we ought to be studying rather than the angle of the leaf, or whether it's, resistance to septoria is important, but these guys are more important.
Yeah. Well, it has to be said, it's sharing that information and sharing that knowledge as well, which is what today is all about. But we're going to move on, and we've got two questions that I'd like to put together. So what do you consider to be the biggest challenge in achieving high yields? And what three factors would you identify as the most important in growing a winning crop? So the biggest challenge that you face, and then three factors that you think are the most important. Tim, do you want to kick off?
Well, as with all outdoor industries, the weather's the biggest challenge, and it's trying to second guess what's going to happen throughout the season to be one step in front. And that's as far as I'm going to get. The weather, we live and die by the weather, so it's being able to try and read through what's happening and trying to be one step in front of it. So biggest three factors that influence yield for me is obviously fungicide, nutrition, and the variety, really. I didn't cover the varieties enough or really very well, but I tend to disagree slightly with everybody else's view on varieties. I think if you pick the right variety and you work really hard with it, and you understand the variety, there is a farm factor in that. The guys that you see down here understand varieties, should understand how they work. And if you work hard enough with a variety, you'll be able to produce a much better yield than your next door neighbour, the same way as you do with fungicides and things. So variety factor to me is also there. You've got to understand that some varieties need a higher seed rate, some varieties need a lower seed rate, and it's what you're trying to produce heads per square metre. So that's my starting factor. Then you're going to move into fungicides and nutrition. You've got to get your fungicides right throughout the season. And this year it's proved that having collaboration of people helping me, BSF, Bio Nature, and that has paid tenfold over being my own man, because they've allowed me to do stuff that you wouldn't normally do, and that's what's helped me with the wheat yields this year. So putting a copious amount of fungicide onto control septoria at T1 proved the right way to go this year. We all thought it was going to be a dry later spring, and Revysol actually, with a really high rate, actually controlled the septoria with our higher rating septoria varieties really well and kept the green leaf area right through the season. So going back in with a 3/4 rate second half of the season has really controlled that. And the other bit we're really concentrating on, have been for the last 2 years to try and tip those extra yields in there, is the harvest index area, so grain numbers per ear. So I'm renowned for putting heads per square metre in there, but we're also now producing more grains in that ear. And so those two factors need looking at. And that's down to nutrition as well as fungicide. You've got to get the exact right nutrition in the ear and the flowering point to produce extra grain size. So you, 13 florets a side or 12 florets or 10 florets a side on an ear is able to produce up to 6 grains. And I hadn't seen it until this wonderful variety called Theodore came out, and we've managed to get 6 grains across the Theodore ear the last 2 seasons. And so that's really interesting to see that. We haven't managed it on any other variety yet consistently, but Theodore has managed that. And that's supposedly on the list, the lowest yielding variety on the list. So, and we got it 3rd in this year's category. So those sort of things, I think, really need looking over and working really hard on, because we got really good sized grain considering the season as well. It was in the average category. So those bits, and that comes down to nutrition as well as fungicide. So a lot of the ear nutrition that we've used in the Bio Nature job, that has really helped in there. I've been concentrating on making those 4 and 5 and 6 grains across the middle of the ear, and actually decent sized grain. So I'll pass it over to Mark.
Yeah, so my number 1 is weather, and that, like I said earlier, my variety, everything was delayed in it to some of my other oilseed rape crops, and that yield benefit has proved, and that, so the weather's definite. One main thing I always look on is nutrition. So I'm a big fan of using organic manures and that. So the use of all of that has been good, and I was developing things going forward, but fortunately the Environment Agency's now put a spanner in the works for that, but that's a whole nother subject. And so key factors really is weather, luck a little bit, but the luck is mainly because of the weather. Soil health is very important. Going back to the days when my parents did the farm, soil health wasn't as good as it was. So probably over the last 7 years now, along with my agronomist, we've been doing a lot with cover crops, manures and that to improve the soil health. And now we've got a healthy soil. I've noticed straight away that the yields have gone up massively.
Great. Simon, do you want to grab the mic?
I don't want to dwell on the similar theme, but it probably is important that I touch on weather, given where we are in the country and sort of the middle of Northern Ireland. We've had a really unusual season this year. Roger touched on it in some of his maps. We have had a lot of sunshine. We've had really warm weather at the right time, which I think is contrary to the rest of the country and some of the more traditional big arable areas. So that has really borne out, I think, in some of the yields that we've seen this year. We had temperatures in the 30s at the end of July. With the Northern Ireland record was beaten 3 times in a week. So, I think it'd be remiss not to mention weather, but I think the critical thing, aside from that for me, is timing. It obviously relates back to weather, but being able to go and apply fertilizer sprays when we need to as quickly as possible and get in before we do get disease pressure and we could be out of a window. I'd agree with Mark and Tim in terms of key factors, but I think the other one I would just add, I suppose, is timing, given where we are in the country.
Great. David?
I'm afraid I'm going to say weather as the biggest challenge. Certainly has the biggest effect on our business and potential to grow consistently good crops. What was your question? Oh, key, yeah. I would say crop establishment is probably, especially for oilseed rape, we've seen the crops been decimated in the country. due to poor establishment for various reasons, be it cabbage stem flea beetle or droughts in August. We're quite lucky in our part of the world because it generally rains in August. So establishment for oilseed rapes, not bad, but getting the crop and the right plant population so that you can actually deal with that crop through the season is pretty key, I think. That's all I'm going to say, I think.
Yeah, I think soils, which is sort of borne out in what you're reading all the press and reading about now, are critical. And on the weather theme, I think one thing I've learned from Yen, unless you're on a sand or a gravel, is rain is less important than I thought it was, and so important sunlight. And you could just see that from the maps earlier. Anywhere south of the M4's had a pretty disappointing harvest this year, and it was the grey part. It shows you how important the last 2 months of sunlight is, which is out of our control. But every year we try and get around there and hope the weather's on our side at the end. The other things are sort of, I feel, are almost, it's not belittling them, but tinkering at the edges. It's a few percent here, a few percent there. But if you get a dull June, July, and knocks 20% off your yield, but then next year might be a brilliant year, so we carry on. But no, I think soil is critical, and that last 2 months of sunshine, what drives yield for us, and the condition of the soil.
Yeah, ask a bunch of arable farmers what their biggest challenge is, and what a surprise, it's the weather. I think everyone would agree with that. Well, sticking with the weather, we've got another question here. This is about, it's questioning your maps, Roger. So sunlight was so important this year. How come the yen potential yields on your maps, on your map was so, well, it was still a lot higher in the south, where it was a lot duller?
Yeah, but remember the maps are anomaly maps. So the south, on average, has 10% more solar radiation than the north, or numbers roughly like that. So an anomaly is not necessarily moving the north to be like the south. It's just moving it in relation to what it normally is. Hopefully that's just a simple explanation.
I'd be interested to know, David, as in David Fuller, whether, so presumably being in the north, you saw a lot more sunlight this year. Did you feel that you saw a lot more sunlight?
I think we had a duller year than normal, but I don't think it was as dull as down south.
Down south, no, indeed. Well, just sticking...
August was particularly grey, but then most of the work's done by August, you would hope, especially for oilseed rape.
Right. Well, sticking with the weather, we've got another question here. How are you coping with recent erratic weather? Climate change is such an important topic at the moment. We're all talking about it. But you're never entirely sure whether a storm of rain, when it's particularly vicious, is down to climate change or whether it's just a storm of rain. So it'd be interesting to ask our panelists if you'd like to give your views on how you're coping with recent erratic weather events, and is it influencing your approach, your choices, your attitude to risk, and so on. So we're going to start at this end this time. So David, would you like to give your views?
It makes you more focused of getting on when you get a weather window where it's harvest, drilling, whether that's on the back of a couple of rubbish autumns, but we've had those before. 2012 was fairly rubbish, like 2000. So it's not really affecting what we do. You just crack on when you get an opportunity, which has always been farming. The heat, I think, is becoming a bit of an issue further down south, that we're getting a lot more days over 30 degrees, which tend to shut plants like peas and wheat down, which may be a factor, and maybe a more worrying factor going forward. We obviously can't change it, but it may mean different varieties come forward. But farming's always been about juggling with the weather, isn't it? So it's, yeah.
David, would you like to?
We bought a bigger drill, basically. I think farming in the Scottish borders has always had weather as an influence. August is generally our wettest month of the year on average, although that has changed the last couple of seasons, and it has become a little bit drier. I just think we're finding ourselves working in tighter weather windows, so we've got to be equipped to do that, and we've got to choose robust varieties and plant types that enable us to get through the worst of it. I think it's just little bits of everything you've got to do a little bit sharper to stay on top of the job.
Good answer. Simon, do you want to give your views?
Yeah, much like David, I suppose we're quite used to erratic or unpredictable weather. But and again, back to my previous answer, a bit around, I suppose, being prepared and being timely in how we get on and apply. But I suppose on a wider sort of strategic level, the work that I do on soils and trying to make sure that I've got resilient soils and that water holding capacity is certainly something that I think there's a lot more behind that, and I'd certainly like to learn a bit more of that through this process. So, soil resilience, I guess, is probably one of the biggest focuses.
Yeah, I'll agree with that, with the soil health and that. It certainly helps, and that so that it helps your timings and everything. But yeah, weather and that, I usually look at loads of weather sites like the BBC and other ones. And what I try and find useful is looking at the satellite pictures of where the rainfall's coming from in the wind direction. So usually if you look at America and that, sometimes the wind weather patterns from America come and hit Scotland and Ireland first and then come down to the south and that as a rule. But I must admit this year, following the BBC weather predictions and that has been a waste of time, because most of the time they said our area was dry and that, and you'd get up in the morning and it'd be raining and things. And so it's looking at things like that mainly.
So we'll be back on old ground for me again. So varieties is the way I cope with weather. Trying to get more resistant varieties. That's how we look at different. Trying to talk at something, agree with everything else on the panel, but looking at outside the box again. Varieties is a good way of working with weather. So if you've got a yellow rust variety that's going to break down in the autumn, there's actually no legal fungicide you can use now. So that's a real problem. And using varieties to be high rated on Septoria, it gives you a bit more of a green feel about it, because you're actually got a variety that's resistant. You're not going to be pressurized like a Theodore or even a Champion. You're not pressurized with a T0, a T1. You need to go out there and you need to spray it, but because they're a higher disease resistant variety, it gives you a bigger window to get out there. So that takes the weather pressure off. So I'm trying to look at it the other way around, how to depressurize your farm system. And these two varieties look like they're going to do us really well for the season. And then we go into the smart nutrition, the bio nature side, trying to depressurize things late season. This year it was about fungicides late season. Last year it was all about keeping it greener by longer by that type of nutrition. So delaying the ethylene production in the plant, all that sort of type of nutritional type of elements you can push into the plant and slow up the ethylene production, which stops the closing up of the leaves. So in above 25 degrees heat, product like X-Stress or something like that, or a Calflux type product, will help that plant keep putting yield on. Most plants will close down, roll the flag leaf up and stop producing yield. But 19 and 20, we saw these products really accelerate the yield in there. And obviously fungicides help that, but the big factors were the nutrition in that year. 2021, it was all about the fungicide helping derating the plant in that second half of the season. So that's where I am on the weather side.
Oh, great. Thanks for that, Tim. Well, moving on, and here's something that comes up every year, and it's often talked about. So it's the margin. And I've heard so many farmers say, oh, well, it's all very well that Tim getting those 15-ton yields, but you chuck so much stuff on it. So I don't know, Tim, whether you want to share some of some of the figures that you've been using. So look at the net margin and explain, perhaps put some explanation around that.
So we'll go on variable costs, because that's where our margins are over everybody else. We're probably underneath on the other side, because I never buy anything new. It's always second hand in terms of farm machinery, so we're different to everybody else sat on the panel. But so on that side, standard variable costs until this year with the nitrogen where it's gone, 2022, not 2021 season. We'd be £800 a hectare, and a lot of that cost will become in the nutrition, fungicide and nitrogen element. This year, obviously, we're going to have to look at the nitrogen element, because 350 kilos a hectare, which we are above everybody else in applications, I think, is going to be a big issue at the current price. So I don't know where I'm going to be with that. But last year, bought it around about 200 to 230 pound a tonne for nitrogen. It works really well for us. And if you can imagine a 15 tonne a hectare currently, let's say £200, let's round it down rather than up, that's £3,000 gross margin with an £800 a hectare cost, if you see what I mean. There's no problems at all at that, is there?
Mark, I can see you. It looks as though you're checking your figures, Mark.
Yeah. So I'm quite low, I would say, on my gross margins. Really, I mean, I'm only doing one fungicide. No, sorry, I'm doing 3 fungicides, one at autumn and then the 2 sclerotinia ones. But even so, this year I cut back and only did the 1. Nutrition, I'm only putting 210 kilos of nitrogen on. And a lot of it is because of, like Tim's been going on about varietal choice and that. I'm choosing varieties where you've got the FOMA resistance, you've got the pod shatter resistance, and looking forward at the turnip yellow ones, I'm not there yet, but just considering things like that. So I don't know my total actual figure, but I know that my gross margin will be better than a lot of people's.
Yeah. Simon.
Yeah, I suppose, and I'll go back to oats again. Oats traditionally would have been a break crop, but because of the niche market that we have in terms of milling, which we don't have that luxury with wheat in Northern Ireland. We do put a big focus on quality, I suppose, rather than yield. Again, this year has been exceptional in terms of the yields that we've managed, but I suppose we're constantly focused on quality. So, what we need in terms of controlling mildew, crown rust, I suppose 2 to 4 fungicides. This year we used 4 because of the season that we had. So it paid off in that program, but I suppose in other years where we might be sort of struggling with weather conditions or yield potential may not be where it was this year, we'd probably reduce our fungicides accordingly.
David.
Yeah, I don't have to hand what we spent, but wheat-wise, we'll have spent about £90 a hectare on fungicide, put about 220 kilos of N on, PGRs where required, oilseed rape, we'll put 4 fungicides on, use hybrid varieties, which I guess costs a little bit more, but gives us some security in what we're doing, and nitrogen on the oilseed rape's about 210 kilos. We use a RN sensor to apply that, so that's a variable application. So I don't think to get the yields that we got, we overspent particularly any more than anybody else would.
We don't do any particularly out the norm, probably slightly higher bias towards fungicide and probably a bit less on herbicide, about 220 kilos of N on wheat. One thing I think Yen shows is chucking inputs doesn't buy you yield. If you look at the Yen figures, the lower and the higher yielding ones, there's not much difference in the use of the amount of fungicide or the amount of nitrogen. There's other things going on. Just because you want to bump up your yields, it's not chucking more nitrogen on or upping your fungicide spend. And I think that's one key thing I've learned from Yen. We're always trying to learn, and that's one reason we do a lot of trials. We're always trying to push boundaries and learn what we can cut out and what we need to put on extra. But chucking money at it doesn't gain you yield, or very little, not economically. Just get the basics right, your 3 or 4 fungicides, I don't know, reasonable amount of nitrogen, keep it upright, the right variety, and don't chuck too much at it.
Yeah, sort of staying with that sort of theme, I've got an interesting question at the bottom here. Do you think there is a negative relationship between high yields and disease resistance management strategies? And this is something that it's quite a discussion point at the moment, especially with the rise of regenerative agriculture. And regenerative agriculture farmers would say, it's not about chucking fungicide on. It's about getting your plants to be more healthy, your soil to be more healthy, and so on. So to what extent, I'm going to slightly change the question here. So to what extent, is it about making sure that your plants are clean, making sure that they're optimized nutrition and so on and so forth? And to what extent is it down to the plant health and the soil health? I don't know. Actually, Roger, I'm going to put that one to you first, if you'd like to put some thoughts on that. Microphone.
I'm not sure I can really answer this, Tom, but in a useful way. I'm fairly sure, I'm looking at my colleagues hard, there has been careful research done on this question and by our plant pathology colleagues, and I don't think there are any in the room. But I'm fairly sure that we can give you the answer, although not from the people who are present. We can put pounds on resistance.
Right. What views from the farmers on this then? I suppose I've slightly changed the essence of the question because it's talking about disease resistance management, but and I've kind of thrown the Regen Ag card in here. But I don't know what views have you got, Mark? You've got the microphone there.
Are you on about because the disease is obviously affecting the leaf? So we find I think all of us on this panel, if you can maximise green leaf, you maximise in yield. So if you've got disease, then you're shrinking green leaf in areas. And particularly this year in wheat, I got late septoria. And I know for a fact that is the main contributor why my yield was down this year on my winter wheats. So that's probably about the best way I can really answer that.
Anyone else like to give a view on that one? Maybe not. Okay. Well, moving on. What other questions have we got here? Oh, yes. The future of oilseed rape. That's a really good one. I mean, we've been really sort of thrown a googly with flea beetle here, and I think we're now beginning to understand how to cope with it. I would suggest, but I mean, obviously, and I asked this question of Mark earlier today, actually, about oilseed rape and how he's coping with flea beetle. Do you think we're getting more confident about the future of oilseed rape now?
Me personally, yes, I am. The answer I gave earlier is a theory I've noticed this year by looking at maps. Is I've got a farm about a mile away from the sea, and although I do get shot hole in my rape plant, I'm wondering, is the salt air and that, or the atmosphere there, eliminating flea beetle slightly? Because then if you go from the coast to the base of the Wolds, there was a band there where they saw more flea beetle this year. And then as you get up onto the Wolds and that, we're slightly colder. So is that affecting the migration a little bit? Again, we're getting the shot hole in and that, and there is some larvae presence, but not to the degree. Then you go off the Wolds into the Midlands and everything where it's flatter, and I believe that the flea beetle present there is a lot greater and that. But that's a question I would also like maybe to throw out to you as the audience. Have any of you noticed this theory? Because to be fair, with flea beetle, we've all got our own pie in the sky ideas how to combat it or whatever. Well,
that's an interesting one, Mark. Just a show of hands. I mean, is there anyone who farms very close to the coast and has noticed this effect? Have we got anyone who farms close to the coast here? And have you noticed this effect of perhaps the saltiness warding off the flea beetle? Any views on that? Only growing mustard. But they do attack the mustard, right? Right. The larvae doesn't get into it, but you do get shot holding. Okay. Yeah. Great. Anyone? Other views? Confidence in oilseed rape. Anyone else want to give their view? Tim, you must be confident in it. You're confident in everything.
So yeah, coping with flea beetle. There's the cover crop method, or there's my version. So instead of growing a cover crop, how about trying a slow developing oilseed rape with a fast developing one? We've tried this will be our third season for doing it. So basically using the slow developing one to take all the flea beetle pressure off the fast developing oilseed rape crop. We did unofficial farm trials on it 2 years ago, and side by side, and I'm sorry I've got to mention the variety, but Aspire is one of the slowest growing varieties I've ever met, and we were teaming it up with Aurelia and Antigua, and the test was in the Aspire when we pulled it out, we got up to 20 flea beetle actually larvae in the stem, versus the Antigua or the Aurelia where they've got one or nothing. So that host was actually working, and they were attacking the other. We got flea beetle in the field, but the hybrid plants that we drilled were actually getting away without any damage whatsoever. So we didn't suffer any flea beetle damage in the crop. We didn't want to suffer any flea beetle damage, but the host crop nearly got completely wiped out. And we've done that so next year or this season's crop that we may or may not enter in the yen, they are all dual crops, so there'll be a varietal mix. We've used Acacia, even though it's the best one on the list for speed in conventional varieties. We've mixed that up with Antigua, Aurelia, Scorpion, so all immigrating but all much faster. So that the real secret to that mix is having a variety that's slower developing, even though Acacia is pretty quick. All the three varieties at least 1.5, 2 points quicker on that AHDB score list, and they do depressurize it. We had no end of pressure in one of the crops that we got this year, but as the plants got bigger and they started to separate out, the pressure stayed in the Acacia, and the I think it's LG 419, which is a new one from Limagrain, actually got up and away and it was well in front, and there was no shot holding in the second lot of leaves that came out there, whereas the Acacia was still taking that pressure off it all the time.
So just to clarify there, Tim, you plant this is in the same field and you drilled homogeneously, and is it the quantities the same?
So yeah, it's a farmer mix style. So basically, whatever's in the bag of hybrid, we weigh out and do that in that. So it's nice and easy. So we'll put a bag of home saved in with a bag of whatever hybrid it is, and weight for weight basically. So make it easy so that your drillman hasn't got to think 45 times. That's 2/3 of that bag. It's literally weight for weight, and you're basically using that conventional variety as a host crop to take the pressure off. But we've got 100% established even in the flea beetle pressure areas this time. So I've been well impressed that mix has kept us going, and it's a different way of looking at it. Everybody has their own ways of doing it, but for us, especially on the Tumby Sands, which we suffer sometimes some serious high pressure down there, the whole farm looks phenomenal. The oilseed rape down there this year.
No, that's great. Anyone else got any views on confidence of oilseed rape going forward? Right, well, moving on, we've got a question here about your approach to crop nutrition and what are your plans for this season. Again, Tim, hate to pounce on you, but you are known for the weird and wonderful things that you put on your crops. So do you want to share some of that with us?
Okay, so we always start with the autumn with what I'd call a root-producing type nutrition program. So I've used what we call a Delta product, so it's a Delta K or a Delta CA. We use Delta K at home all the time, and that's a stabilised form of nitrogen, but it's not. I mean, it's about 0.05 of a kilo of nitrogen that's going on the field, so it's not really. We're not talking about nitrogen amounts, but it's used there to produce cytokinin growth into the actual plant. So what that's doing is producing a root structure. So when you get the cytokinin growth, you get a fibrous root structure that's able to capture much more resources than you would without it. And some of the work we've done this year, and we haven't quite correlated it all together, but Son Robert's done some as well. He did a Delta project this year, and it's proved in it that we're getting a better biomass and a better root structure in the autumn from using that product. So if you get a better root structure, you're going to capture more nutrients, which is all about biomass. So that's how we've done it. Moving into the spring, we've always used Delta early on in the spring to keep that root structure going, get that cytokinin, get a bit more strength in the stem, a few more tillers there, and sustain that biomass. And then we move into 3 different types. So there's a tip top, an X-stress and a Calflux type program. And I think you need to go see the Fine-H lads to talk about it than me carry on talking about it. But those 3 are what we use through the rest of the program to build that biomass, keep the greenness in there, and finish them off.
My analogy on nutrition is I'm a big believer in organic manures and I try to use them as much as possible. Like I said before, the EA is going to try and mess that up for me. But I always throw the question of like, treat a plant like you treat a human. So as a human, if you eat healthily and eat well, you don't have to take as much medication. It's exactly the same as for a plant, I find. You give that the correct nutrition and make it healthy, you can help it sort of have less disease issues.
Great. Anyone else got other views?
Yeah, so I suppose I use a lot of liquid nitrogen. I use all liquid nitrogen, and I suppose I've been trying over the years to reduce inputs, reduce nitrogen reliance on the oats. What I don't want is to encourage a lot of biomass, which can happen, particularly with Mascani. So I'll aim to hopefully continue to reduce a little bit, but how I'll do that, I'm hoping to use leaf application rather than soil application, and try and see is there anything more in that. Probably little and often, and go maybe a couple of extra runs across the field with a lower rate of liquid. So it's probably a good year to try it, I think, and to open that front.
Great. David, any views?
Nutrition-wise, I suppose where we start off with do soil analysis for NPK and lime. So we variably apply products to top up the soil with yield offtakes. Nitrogen-wise, we're using a Yara N sensor to variably apply nitrogen to the crops, be it wheat or oilseed rape. The oilseed rape, we use the absolute N, so the N sensor can test the GAI of the crop as we drive across it, varying the rate according to that. So that saves doing lots of walking and calculations on biomass to get the right nitrogen in. Trace element wise, I guess over the years we've built up a database of what elements we're likely to be short of. So we have a program with on oilseed rape, we're putting boron, molybdenum, magnesium on, and then back that up with leaf analysis. I think it's very difficult to take a leaf analysis on the day and change your mind for your application, because if you get a rainfall event, then the plant may take it up. So it's more of a historical approach. Yeah, and that's about it really. So just looking at it in detail really, and just varying things according to field conditions and analysis.
Great. David, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that. No, it has to be said that, I mean, that's the full spectrum. I can't think of anything, anything more to take away from this as far as nutrition is concerned. But look, we've had some fantastic answers and a really, really good insight into how these guys grow these incredible crops. And it's certainly been fascinating for me. I hope it has been for you as well. I'd like to thank, Tom seems to have disappeared, but thank you very much to Tom for presenting all the awards. But thank you most of all to to all of our winners for their, for sharing their thoughts and their insight. Congratulations. These really are stonking achievements, and I think we're all learning from it. So if you'd like to show your appreciation. Great. Well, if you'd like to step back down into the audience, I'm going to ask Dan Kindred to come up and tell us about, the yen for 2022, I believe, aren't you?
Yeah, well, the future. So thank you, Tom, for that. So, I mean, Roger's mentioned that we started in 2012 and we've now got a whole proliferation of yens that, both across crops and subjects and now internationally as well. But really the thing that kind of, I'm hoping, when we started out with this, we really wanted to create a platform for industry and science to kind of work together. And I think, it's been frustrating over the last 8 years. We haven't really felt like we've achieved that. I think we are now getting to the point where we are, starting to get that recognition, starting to be able to build things going forwards. And to me, the main thing that we've kind of learned with the yen is actually, it's the approach. It's the approach that we've got here. That when we started with yield, but actually, what Roger kind of calls action research or share to learn is actually applicable to any question or any issue. And by working together as a network of people, bringing together advisors, industry, farmers, and researchers to tackle a question together, to all learn from each other, is really what I think whether the power is. And this is where we're now starting this new project. We've got some funding now for what we're calling Farm PEP, a performance enhancement platform. So we can take the ideas of the yen, the approach of the yen, but applying that to any question, any issue. And really, we think about this in these kind of what we think of as the 4 pillars. So starting with kind of shared knowledge, so a shared understanding of the issue that we're talking about. That drives the metrics, that drives the data that we should be collecting. We can share that together, and then by being able to providing that data back to you in these kind of benchmarking diagrams and the reports, it provides an incentive for you to provide the data, but also then provides a data set for us to kind of make those shared learnings. We then have together from the data, from the kind of the conceptual knowledge, from your experience on farm, the development of ideas, what it is that we could be doing differently, and then the ability then to test those together. So in a coordinated way, on-farm experimentation, whether that's a product or a system or whatever, being able to test that on-farm. And so really this approach, I kind of feel that there's very few questions in agriculture that we can't tackle in this way. And that's what we're now doing, is trying to do, if you like. We've been lucky over the last year. We've been very unlucky for the last 8 years of not really getting much in the way of kind of public support for developing the systems that we need for the yen. We've now got more than we can handle to some extent. But to develop these kind of the various parts of those 4 pillars, essentially. So I'll start with those in terms of the knowledge. We're now creating what we're calling farmpep.net. So this is kind of a knowledge exchange website. So what I wanted to be able to create here is something where we can, for any subject, any topic, we can put out there what's the state of the knowledge, and that you can connect with. As a person, as an organisation, projects that you have, we can bring that together and connect, because as an industry we're so disconnected, we're so fragmented, and we need something that can bring it together, and that's what I hope we can achieve with farmpep.net, so the web part of that. We've also then, in terms of the metrics and the data, we had some funding earlier in the year to help to bring together the data set. So up until now we've been working with kind of Excel spreadsheets and what have you. We've now got all the data into one data set, which is really, really valuable to us, and we can now open that up to you. And so for Yen Nutrition and Yen Zero now, the data entry is all online. That data is going straight into the database. So that'll make it much better. The process for us reporting is much easier going into the future. We'll know about your fields. You can create new fields, you add them in, then you add that agronomy data in. You'll see what data you've already put in there. That's where we're going. What we're now with the new Farm PEP project that we've got, working with Map of Ag, is to be able to connect that with your gatekeeper or your muddy boots or whatever. And what we want to be able to get to is you can just permission that data and say, yeah, I want to share this data with the Yen or with whoever. That feeds in the database. Then all you've got to do is fill in the missing values. You haven't got to do all that copying and pasting or that laborious data entry. The other thing that we've created there is dynamic benchmarking. So now all of you, any past member of the Yen can now log onto the Yen website and access select your past data and view for a selected set of so yield and grain nitrogen, phosphorus and a few other things. You can see how you compare to that whole data set online, but also then crucially you can filter what you're comparing yourself to. So you can select I want to just compare myself to this soil type or to in this region, and then so the box and whiskers plot changes essentially, and that's available now. It's only a prototype version, so I mean we know we need to improve it, but that's again what we can do now is improve this. And so I'm really looking for your feedback and your kind of ideas, if you like, and how we can make this better. How can we create something which is really valuable to you that actually gives you information in real time, hopefully, that's valuable to you. Roger mentioned the COP and what we've been doing over the last few years with satellite imagery, and we've done this with some of the Yens. The Yen Data in the Multiply project, which is an EU project that we've been involved in for the last 4 or 5 years. Is we can hopefully we can track every field in the world now, essentially, in terms and getting those metrics for how crops are performing. And so there's a potential. I think there's a massive potential here to actually kind of share back with you a meaningful set of metrics about things like growth stage 31, or when you've reached full canopy cover, what the size of your canopy was, when senescence started. Those kind of metrics potentially are really valuable, and we can kind of share those back. So we've got a project with a similar with the UK Space Agency, kind of looking to operationalise that and be able to provide that back to you via dynamic benchmarking. And we're looking to kind of form kind of a crop monitoring club to kind of help kind of guide that. There's also just this idea of working with farmers, working together in groups. And so with AICC, sorry, in this new project, we're kind of getting to best practice about actually kind of how can we best work together to tackle a question. And then there's the on-farm testing. So at the moment, we've done all this, and we do this with lots of you guys already, with 200 line trials a year, where we're doing the stats from your yield map, and we can get to statistical answers rather than just a demonstration. What we want to be able to do is to be able to give you put the tools in your hands so that you can actually kind of do more robust on-farm trials and put them in, have the confidence to put them in the right places and get the analysis, get to robust conclusions from them. So, I mean, I've got a side polyp. So what I'm interested in is kind of, if you've on slide, I'll just leave this open. But so those four pillars, if you like, what are the most important to you in terms of what would you find the most useful out of those four things? The knowledge sharing website, being able to share data more easily online, being able to do that online in interactive benchmarking, getting satellite derived metrics, or having tools for support on farm trials. I'll leave that open, but if that would be really useful to me, to us, in terms of being able to prioritise where we should be going with this. Okay, so we obviously want to keep you guys involved in the YENs going forward, and Farm PEP as well going forward. So registration for 2022, cereal and oilseed YENs are open. It's on the website in the normal way. You can register that. We have Yen Nutrition, so there's still time to kind of submit samples from 2021 for any of your crops or any of your combinable crops, getting that full grain analysis and benchmarking reports on that back. With Farm PEP, we're developing in a kind of a very open co-design way, and so farmpep.net, we're just looking for your feedback the whole time in terms of how we create this. If you want to get involved in any of that, then please do. There's a survey on there. If you fill the survey in, then we'll have your details to keep you in touch. And there's a technical webinars on the 6th and 8th of December where we can continue this, and you'll find out. Well, we'll be in touch with you. I think there should be details be sent to you if you're a YEM member in the next few days if they haven't gone out already. Okay. So lastly, again, big thank you to the sponsors. It wouldn't exist without you. Big thank you to all the entrants. Crucially, none of this happens or none of this exists without the farmers getting involved and all the enthusiasm we've seen from the panel. But everybody who does it. I mean, there is a lot of effort that goes into it. And, well, big thank you to the team, big thank you to Jane and Katie for organising today, and a big thank you to Tom for chairing us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dan. That just about wraps it up. And I think, I just want to sort of repeat what I said earlier. I mean, what a great insight we've heard today. And we always get that with YEN. And I do think, it's just such an important industry initiative to get involved with. And so if you haven't been involved with it in the past, I'd implore you to think about it and get involved. I've done it once, I have to admit. I didn't do very well. I think I was 67th out of 67 in that particular category or something. It is a really good way of looking at your crops and getting into it. So I just want to say that thank you very much to all of you for turning up. And thank you very much to YEN. I mean, I have to say the organisation for this has been absolutely spotless. So thank you very much to Katie and to Jane. And that's it. So see you all again next year, I hope. Thank you very much.